with the presence of so much evil and suffering in this present world. Let me give you 3 or 4 principles that I try and keep in my mind. I used to have on my desk a little plastic puzzle. Had a number of cubes that were attached, and in it was a little blue marble. And the trick was to take it apart, get the marble out, put it back together and assemble it, and have the marble in the right cube. There were about 6 of them attached. And I used to, you have no idea how much time I wasted fiddling around with that thing, trying to. And I learned that the trick is there were about 3 big pieces that you had to get in correct order first. And if you got those big pieces in order first, the rest kind of fell into place, and it was easy to make it work. But if you start in the wrong place, it's hopeless. You'll never get it together. These are the pieces I try and get put into place first when I think about a good God and the problem of evil. They don't answer everything, but they're my approach to dealing with the issue. Point number 1. If the world is even half as evil and void of God as people say it is, we should never have discovered it to be so. I view that as the most important. Let me try and explain what I mean with an illustration. Imagine a man who has been blind from birth. Imagine a man who has never once seen the light of sun or moon, never seen a light bulb, never seen a candle, not ever, not even once, not for 1 second. Through some genetic process, he was born with no capacity for sight. Imagine this man waking up one morning, walking over to where he knows the window is, and then imagine him going about his day, and then perhaps at night before he goes to sleep, he walks over to that same window and he says, "Boy, is it ever dark out." Now, if you think about it for a minute, that makes no sense at all. There's something wrong with that picture, because the world would not suddenly seem dark to this man who had never once seen light. The world would not seem unusual to him at all. He's never witnessed any kind of light. He would never have known any other world than a totally dark world that he had always awakened to and always gone to bed with. So he would have absolutely nothing with which to compare the world he lived in that would make it seem dark to him. Now, imagine another world. Let's say a man in his 40s who worked in some kind of plant, and with a chemical accident, he lost his sight. So he has about 40 years of life in a world seeing sunrises and sunsets and colored lights and street lights and traffic lights. And then all of a sudden, it's all snuffed out. It's all taken from him. And he's just beginning to have it register on his heart what it's like to cope with a sightless existence. Now, you can understand that man. You can understand him walking over to his window before he goes to bed. You can understand him just saying, "Oh, I can't believe it. It's so incredibly dark." That makes sense. That makes sense because this is a person who experiences darkness coming from the perspective of knowing about light. So we can understand this because this man knew a world full of light and brightness, and then it was taken away. And so when he says it's so incredibly dark, the world have a kind of angst. The words have an angst to them. And they have meaning because he's comparing his state to a time of brightness. Now, back to this issue of the problem of evil. Because if the world is godless, and the world is evil, and the world is meaningless, okay, if that's the case, and listen, and if it has always been so, then we should never notice it. It ought to, do you understand what I'm saying? It ought to just be the way things have always been. There's nothing striking, there's nothing new, there's nothing unusual. In fact, every time we say the problem of evil, we're speaking something about our makeup. We're saying this isn't the way it ought to be. Even the atheist who cries out and says, I don't know how you Christians can believe in a good God. Look at this world. There's this huge problem of evil and suffering. Well, why is that a problem? What makes you notice it? With what are you comparing this evil world to conclude that it's somehow so abnormal? What standard are you measuring it by? Something is evil because we compare it with what is or was good. Just as something is dark because we can compare it with something light. And in fact, that second illustration of the man who lost his sight and now notices the darkness of the world around him is very much alike to the biblical description of what has happened to this world. We call it the fall.